uNatingai. Don't miss out on this opportunity to celebrate and elevate yourself. Get your tickets now at www.quicket.co.za for 550 Rand, drinks, food and a gift bag included. Plus, stand a chance to win an honor product. This incredible event is powered by independent media and the Honor 200 series.
S3 is bringing you the best in Indian cinema every Sunday at 2 p.m. Laugh, dance, get drawn into the drama, revved up with the action, and maybe, just maybe, shed a little tear. Catch Gagi on the 7th of July, Selfie on the 14th, Prince on the 21st, and Laila Majnu on the 28th. It's Indian cinema like you've never seen it before. Channel your best entertainment with Indian cinema only on S3. Open up.
S3. Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
We continue the conversation on the talking point. Welcome to the second hour of the show for this Monday morning. I think I got so carried away in the first hour, I forgot to tell you what was coming up on the show. So we're going to be continuing with our series in agriculture for this week. We started it off last week, and we began just speaking with a number of people, farm owners and those who are operating the agricultural space, just to share some of their experiences and also to share their concerns. And it's an issue that many of our listeners have been asking us to put on the table for some time. And so we decided then to just dedicate time and attention to it through this series. So today we're going to be focusing on sustainability, in particular for small-scale farmers. And we know just how big this industry is, and really much of the agriculture in our country is resting on the work that is being done by small-scale farmers. So today we'll look at sustainability, and in the final hour of the show we're going to be taking a look at the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. We'll be in conversation with the administrator. It follows a part of what happened last week. You remember those landlords out in Mpumalanga that weren't paid, went to Cape Town, called into the show and said that they were at the gate and were being denied access. So thankfully there was a positive resolution to that. But we want to find out really what is happening with NSFAS and why are there these difficulties in the first place. So the administrator will be joining us in the final hour of the show. So before we get into the continuation of our series, agriculture series, today we're dealing with sustainability. We're going to play a couple of your WhatsApp voice notes from the open line.
Good morning, Katie and SA listeners. You see what, Katie? I'm very proud of this radio station and also the presenters of the SAFM, but always digging and finding the truth to make our eyes to be open. Now they are open for the last moment with the EFF. EFF are corrupt. EFF, they always claiming that they are standing for the poor of the poor, but nothing like that. It's clear they stole that money. They are involved in that corruption of VPS. Malema and Jacob Zuma, they are covering each other. That is why they went to drink a tea there. I was surprised that from Limpopo drive all the way to drink the tea to Nkandla. What was wrong? What was inside in that tea? What does it taste, that tea? Hey, Katie, I am very, very disappointed. This is Nkosinathi Mbanja from Mkambatini. I thank you.
Good morning, Katie. It's Clinton here. Katie, I find it extremely difficult that some people do not even consider the possibility that Floyd and Julius might be corrupt. Really, what makes these two gentlemen so different? But let's wait and see. I keep on saying the space for Malema and Floyd to operate is getting increasingly small.
Morning, Cathy. Big banks like Standard Bank and ABSA and all these other banks, when they donate money to soccer teams, they announce. It's an announcement. Why this one for VPS? It was not announced. It was made private in sunshine, in corners, in dark corners. Some people had to stay away. No press conference, nothing. So that just shows uh, what fraud is in South Africa. And that bank VPS is just a vendor bank from vendor. It's not a big bank. It's for the people of vendor. It cannot donate. Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
All right, thanks for those WhatsApp voice notes that you've sent through. We'll, of course, continue taking them on the various issues throughout the show. While sustainability is a challenge facing small-scale farmers, and it also impacts the business of agriculture on several levels. These include profitability, as the cost of seed to export increases with inflation. One will also have to think about whether to diversify the output of their products. There are also considerations around alternative farming methods. But where there's a basic lack of infrastructure, how do you even begin to think about alternative farming methods? These are just some of the challenges that are facing small-scale farmers on the question of sustainability. They are, of course, what also contributes to the challenges that many farmers face, which is the changing climate and environment. And of course, it also has an impact on food production. As we continue our series, then, we unpack the state of our agricultural sector with a focus on the 2 million small-scale farmers that are in operation today, dealing specifically with issues of sustainability. Mr. Thabile Nkunjana is a senior economist in the Trade Research Unit at the National Agricultural Marketing Council. Mr. Nkunjana, good morning, and thank you for your time this morning. Hello, Thabile.
Yes, good morning, Cathy, and your listeners. Thanks for having me, and apologies for the glitch there.
No problem at all. Dr. Jack Armour is Commercial Manager at Free State Agriculture. Jack, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and good morning, listeners. Good morning, panelists.
Ms. Mandisa Mazibuko is a master's candidate in the Department of Crop Sciences from the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences at the Northwest University. Mandisa, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy and the listeners. Thank you for having me today.
Thabile, let me kick off this conversation with you. There are, of course, a number of issues that I've highlighted very briefly that speak to the sustainability of small-scale farming. And by its very nature, based on what we heard last week, the aim for the sector should be to ensure that those that are considered small-scale farmers actually move out of that position, because without that, then they are precarious in nature, and sustainability remains a big question because their operations are not always profitable.
Yes, Kathy. There has always been the question around the viability, the sustainability of the smallholder farmers across South Africa, and this is something that has put on quite a traction in terms of what should be happening. A couple of policies have been developed and so forth in trying to to assist them. But as you rightly mentioned, a couple of issues that that are always been there is that small scale farmers, they have always been challenged by several difficulties, and it's always been the matter of how do they get to be in line, or at least linked to the bigger picture of the agricultural sector. So the agricultural sector is worth at least 300 billion in terms of values. And this is something that has always been pushed in trying to make sure at least that some of these small-scale farmers get to be part of that. But there are issues with that, especially given that now we are operating in a world where it is important in terms of, the other very basic things that can be very critical or at least tricky for small-scale farmers to be part of. And this has to do with things like, the product that is being produced, as much as this has been debunked in South Africa for a number of times, that is the product worthy of being in the market, can those small scale farmers be able to produce a product that will sustain, a contract? For instance, if one has a contract to supply a typical, a retail, if it's a retail or other business that is exporting, for instance, can those small scale farmers be able to do that? And these are some of the issues that have always been, partly then an issue. And also given that South Africa has always been a country that has been, having quite a different, circumstances as far as compared to other countries that have the agricultural sector, where we have had quite a large number of, commercial farmers producing larger, around 80% of food that is produced in South Africa is from a very small number of large-scale commercial farmers, with small-scale farmers contributing, around to the remaining, portion. So it has relatively became a very, complex situation to try to get this. But I mean, there has been some policies and developments in pushing this and trying to make sure that they become part of the value chain.
Tabile, is the system not like this by way of design, that ultimately it is not in the interests of these bigger farmers who you say contribute 80% of the produce? It is not in their interest for small-scale farmers to actually come up. And that's why we continue to have the problem of financial viability for many of these individuals, because they simply are unable to tick the boxes. And when we look at what those boxes are, you talk about the need to be able to secure produce of a particular quality at a particular scale, that it would be acceptable to market. All of that needs money. And from what we heard from the farmers last week, often that is where the challenge is, that even if they have off-take agreements, they still struggle to get institutions that are going to be able to finance their operations to the point where they can actually meet up some of those commitments.
Yes, correctly. This is definitely something that farmers have raised. Even the other organized, groups, particularly the black organizations that are representing farmers, of course, of different scale. Now, the issue with for instance, in securing funding, or at least money that one can be able to expand in his or her operation, it has always been the requirements. So for instance, if you are to take a farmer that is working on a communal land, for instance, a communal land that is a land that is owned, be it by the chiefs, or in a typical rural area where the land is allocated based on the resident around that area. Therefore, it is owned by the community in that state. So if you are that farmer, you would like to get money, for instance, to expand your operations. Now, how do you go about to go to a bank and say, look, I'm a farmer, I can produce, or maybe I've been producing for the past 3 years. I would like to get a loan of 500,000 to expand my operations. The bank with that, it can sound even, you can say that, and you can have a very beautiful story, but the bank will need something to say, look, we get what you're saying, but now how, if this business of yours does not get to materialize, how are we going to be able to get our money back somehow? And that's when the issue of the deeds, that is one owing the land itself and other equipments within that farm. So meaning you will need some form of collateral. That is, if that business of yours does not get to operate, or at least succeed, then the bank was going to have some sort of security to get, which is something that mostly commercial farmers are having. Because if you're a commercial farmer operating in a business that is turning around 22 million per year, you're going to definitely have machines. You're going to have stuff that the bank can be able to say, look, based on the fact that you cannot be able to pay our money, we're going to confiscate your harvester and so forth, make sure that we get our money back. And this is some things that all farmers do not have.
Jack, what is the threat when it comes to the sustainability of small scale farmers. I think that Tabile, has done a good job just painting a picture of the disparities that exist between your commercial farmers versus your small scale farmers, and how the two really are worlds apart in terms of what they're able to put on the table. That, of course, would be what they need to unlock perhaps the next level of their operations.
Thank you, Tabile. Yes. Thank you, Cathy. Tabile did paint the picture very nicely about the disparities, and he also mentioned that that almost 80% of the food is being, or big percentage of the food is being produced by a very small number of commercial farmers. Now, when we speak of these commercial farmers, there's a handful of mega farmers that are producing a lot of the food, but a lot of what we call commercial farmers, and by that I assume we're meaning VAT registered farmers, a very large percentage, about 70% of them, are earning a turnover of under 5 million. So according to the SMME standards and stuff, that's actually an SMME. It's a small scale business with a very small turnover. So the threats and the issues that are the sustainability issues that small scale farmers are facing are very much the same as the small commercial farmers are also facing. And that's also your climate change issues, your risk issues. I mean, farmers must be the biggest gamblers, I think, in the world, because farming has got all these challenges that you've got to face. And you have boom and bust years. You do really well in one year, and then everybody climbs on the bandwagon and floods the market, and then you do badly the next couple of years. And you've got to make provision in your good years for the bad years. And the risk, the volatility of the markets, with farmers being price takers, that we're dependent on what the market gives us for our product when we deliver it to the market. That's what creates a huge risk. So what has happened, and what they call the Walmart effect in America, is that a lot of big companies, supermarket chains, have contracted farmers to deliver. And that's taken away the sort of market forces very much, that delivering to a fresh produce market and people buying at the fresh produce market, and then from there it goes to the shop at a reasonable markup. Now, because farmers are contracted, there's a kind of a fixed price, and the prices sometimes stay high for a long time. So that price volatility isn't always there in the market to give the right signals through to the farmers. So that your bigger farmers that are able to produce for the contract market are bound in these contracts, and very little then gets on the fresh produce market. And often the excess produce that isn't there for contract gets dumped on the fresh produce market, and that pulls down the prices for the small scale farmer who's now delivering to the fresh produce market. And he gets there and he hardly gets anything for his product. So I know the Competition Commission has recently published a big document regarding the functioning of the fresh produce markets and agents and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of challenges there in access to markets. So the one big sustainability issue is access to markets. So before you can even get a product to market, you need land, number one. And I know Tabile mentioned the access to land issue, and a lot of people that are trying to farm and eke out a living on commonage land. And that's got its own challenges, because now you don't have tenure security. So you can't develop that land because it can just be taken away from you, or somebody else can intrude there, or somebody else's cattle will end up eating up your crop if they break the fence. So those are very real challenges at grassroots level. Is just producing on commonage or tribal or communal land where you don't have title deed that's fenced off, that you can be sure that what you're producing you're going to actually be able to get to a market. So the issue on commonages and stuff, and there's 2.5 million hectares, and I think that's in agreement throughout the political spectrum, is to get the state land that's already there, that's being unproductive, more secure tenure, and given to the people that can really farm it. And what we've noticed is there's a lot of political kind of patronage. Certain people get a lot of help, but other people that are really deserving farmers that do very well, that are in their backyard. And I've often driven through townships and stuff, and you see backyards that are blossoming and flourishing and full of vegetables and fruit. Those guys should be given the opportunity to expand. But often people that don't really have the skills, but they've got the political connections, get an opportunity, but they remain dependent on government. So the government help is very important to give people a kickstart. Just back to the commonages and stuff, and one of the problems we've picked up in the Free State, especially in bordering on Lesotho, is there's a lot of people that are farming on the commonage, but they're using Lesotho herders to herd their cattle while they carry on with their jobs. But commonages are actually really meant for the small-scale farmer that wants to get into farming. In the Free State alone, we sit with over 2,000 unemployed agricultural graduates because we've got a Glen Agricultural College here, we've got a University of the Free State, we've got CUT, we've got the TVET College. So there's a lot of academic institutions that are producing students, but these students aren't getting into agriculture. So there's this unemployed agricultural graduate scheme, or that sounds a bit negative. So now they've called it entrepreneurship scheme to try and get people that are trained in agriculture onto farms that they can get experiential training. But that's also very difficult, and that's a whole new debate and a different set of challenges.
All right.
But what I'm trying to say, there's a lot of people. Yes.
Jack, I'm going to give you the opportunity to continue in a moment. It is 10:30. It's time for the latest news headlines. And on the other side of this, then we'll continue with our agriculture series today, focusing on sustainability.
A very good morning to you with the news headlines. Kemudupi Makhalemele. Western Cape Premier Alan Wendy says the number of people that extreme weather conditions have affected has increased to 158,000. 5 suspected illegal miners have been arrested at Madonzi mine in Malamulele, Limpopo. And on his first trip to Israel, British Foreign Secretary David Lammy is pushing for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and for Hamas to release Israeli hostages. And those are your headlines. A full news update at 11.
All right, taking a look at your markets this morning. The rand is currently trading at 18 rand 04 to the dollar, 23 rand 43 to the pound, and 19 rand 68 to the euro. Markets in Asia were mixed at the closing bell. The JSE red across the board in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are currently in negative terrain. Gold is trading at $2,406, platinum $993 per ounce, and the price of Brent crude oil is at $84.81 a barrel.
Get ready for an exciting show. Believe it, family. It's a big day for 25K. In this brand new show, join us as we follow couples across South Africa on their journey to create their dream wedding for only 25K.
Our biggest hope is that everything fits in the budget of 25K.
There were many things that we had to do in 3 days' time.
We'll share in their disappointment.
It's also stress. Somebody let me down early this morning.
It's a really expensive place. I don't know how we're going to afford to buy this choice.
And celebrate their triumphs.
I always dreamed of this day, but ke sa tsebe hore na e tlo phethahala jwang.
Thank you to everyone that made this day.
A big day for 25K starts the 9th of June, Sunday, 7:30 p.m. only on SABC2.
Attention ladies, join us on Saturday, August 17th, 2024 for the Star Choices Yours Women's Day event at Altitude Fourways, a day dedicated to empowerment, inspiration and transformation. Engage with dynamic speakers, attend interactive conversations and connect with amazing women just like you. The event will be hosted by the fabulous Unatingai. Don't miss out on this opportunity to celebrate and elevate yourself. Get your tickets now at www.quicket.co.za for 550 Rand, drinks, food and a gift bag included. Plus, stand a chance to win an honor product. This incredible event is powered by independent media and the Honor 200 series.
What is Ushuni, you say? Ushuni has a musical gift and can transform a song. Ushuni can fuse folk music with a popular urban beat or tune. Ushuni can take us on a beautiful musical journey. Ushuni way to Gelo. Join us in unearthing South Africa's next folk music star. 40 talented contestants from around South Africa competing for the ultimate grand prize of 500,000 Rand cash and a recording deal. Angeke basikhone with Ushuni Womhlaba, starting 7 July, Sundays at 6 p.m. only on SABC1.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 104.4 FM in Durban.
We continue the conversation on the talking point. We're focusing on our agriculture series and today looking specifically at the issue of sustainability. Mr. Thabile Nkunjana is a senior economist in the Trade Research Unit at the National Agricultural Marketing Council. Dr. Jack Armour is commercial manager at Free State Agriculture, and Ms. Mandisa Mazibuko is a master's candidate in the Department of Crop Sciences from the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences at the Northwest University. So, Jack, you, of course, were breaking down just some of the things that you as an entity have picked up when it comes to sustainability of small-scale farmers. This issue of access to market is really such a big one. And Thabile touched on it earlier because how many small-scale farmers describe it as is we produce so much, we go to the market, sometimes our product is taken, sometimes it's not. And even on the days where it is taken, we're perhaps not getting as much value for it as we think we should be. And so, that of course creates its own web when it comes to financial instability, insecurity. Is there a way in which we can change this question of access to market for small-scale farmers? Jack?
Oh, sorry, Cathy, I wasn't sure you were asking me. Cathy, yes, the way to change that access to markets is with farmers partnering up with a commercial farmer who already has access to those markets. So that's the one point. But before I carry on with that point, I just want to say that small-scale farmers have a crucial role, that the product that they're already producing locally within their local community. So the food they're producing locally, they are selling locally, and that's contributing tremendously to local food security. But to get that food into the formal market, that's when a partnership is required. And there's the Pulse initiative, which is Partners for Agri-Land Solutions. That's doing very well in this. And we've got a couple of farmers in the Free State at the Maluti Pulse. But the Pulse initiative started off in Witzenberg. But we are commercial farmer partners with an emerging farmer, and the emerging farmer then gets access to that commercial farmer's markets by producing together and selling under each other's brands, but eventually creating your own brand for the emerging farmer. So that's one of the solutions that's working very well that we know of.
Is that the only solution in your experience?
There are a lot of government initiatives as well that are assisting farmers to access markets, and especially export markets. There's a lot of challenges, phytosanitary and approvals and all that kind of stuff. And we've seen also through a Pulse project with asparagus and stuff that those HACCP requirements aren't actually that difficult if you just have the political will and the finances to get those things in place. And I think Thabile mentioned the access to finances, and you also said it all costs money. So sometimes that little bit of help, just to if you're producing a good product that is ready for export market, you might need a bit of a help from government. And I'm sure there are departments within small business development and the Department of Agriculture to assist with that. Because there's a lot of focus from government to assist farmers to access markets.
But if we're speaking realistically here, Jack, if somebody is struggling to access markets domestically, highly unlikely that they're going to be able to access markets internationally. If we go back again to some of the issues around sustainability, there's also the fact that you need a certain amount of produce that would be produced consistently in order to meet the demand in a particular area. And many of these small-scale farmers are struggling just with that. So if we're being honest, it's unlikely that many of them are even ready or prepared for the export market. And so my question is, are there things that need to be done differently, even within the domestic market, that could perhaps change the experience of small-scale farmers, also get them to a point of sustainability so that they're able to grow their businesses and can realistically pursue export opportunities as a viable opportunity? Tabile, let me give you a chance to answer that before I hear from Mandisa.
Okay, thanks, Katie. You are raising quite an important part of the whole conundrum around small-scale farmers, and Jack has actually brought in quite some of the key things that are partly an issue. But as far as what is being done, first off, there are currently a lot of programs that the state is doing to assist small-scale farmers. And there are small-scale farmers that are even exporting products to other countries. And this, of course, is via programs that are being developed. But I think what is important is this. It is imperative that the entire issue of the market is understood properly. And this goes as far as the product itself that is going to be produced. For instance, for farmers that there are small-scale farmers that are necessarily not producing for the local market, but to export their products. And this is because of the programs that those guys they have been into. Be it the one that Jack was mentioning in terms of one farmer working with an already established farmer to get the experience. Remember, knowledge is very important in farming, and especially if you are to get to understand what the market requires, because there is no point to produce a product that is already flooding the market and you think that you're going to be able to get the market. So that also talks to the issues of sustaining your particular business. Now, as far as the programs that are there within the NMC, that is National Agri Marketing Council, that I work for, there is a special division that deals specifically in assisting farmers to get the market. But that, of course, it has its limitations because one, in terms of can the farmers, going back to what I said earlier on, can the farmer produce a product that is required by the market? As I made an example about not producing something that is already there, it will not help you. But currently, there are products that are being exported through, partnerships with private sector. There are companies that are exporting. I have quite contacts with some of them, where these guys they work with small-scale farmers. They talk to them in terms of this is a product that is currently in need or in demand. Even ourselves, we do comment around these things to produce, quite what is happening in a typically a market in a product. For instance, remember there was one time where, if I can make an example about during the COVID period, that time very few people were producing ginger and garlic, but based on the demand around that time, a lot of farmers went into that, went to produce ginger and garlic. And guess what happened after the COVID-19 passed and the demand for that, product? It tumbled, to levels that are very low, to an extent that those business, at least those guys that were farming with that, they were no longer making money. As a result, the issue of sustainability was compromised there, and then they had to sort of maybe move to other products and to sell, or at least to produce a different product that the market requires. So these are some of the very basic things that farmers need to understand, and this, of course, it goes back to a lot of other issues that one needs to follow in terms of the market requirements and aligning yourself to certain people that are already within the value chain or producing products.
Mandisa, let me bring you in here, and you specifically look at the agricultural economy. And if we are to think about alternative farming methods sort of in line with the changing climate, are we even at a point where our farmers can begin to have those considerations when by and large it seems so many of them are struggling with the basics?
Thank you, Cathy. Looking at the state of our climate, and the most important thing, I feel like farmers are not well equipped with knowledge on how to even begin with a sustainable farming, because we are so used to conventional farming, the use of fertilizers, the use of pesticides. So now trying to introduce sustainable farming to farmers, I think it is very much important for especially the Department of Agriculture to play a big role in disseminating that information to farmers on how can they even begin to do that. Yes, some of our commercial farmers are much aware of what is sustainable agriculture, how can we practice it, how can we, in what ways can farming be changed into a sustainable way. But then most of our small rural farmers, they still lack that information.
What does it entail, sustainable farming?
Okay, sustainable farming, it entails to promote biodiversity and to promote the soil states. And since I mentioned before, that's looking at the state of our climate, like our climate change and the food security. So with sustainable agriculture, we are trying to promote better farming ways, and we are trying to sustain what we are left with within the environment and the ecosystem, what we have, and we are trying to work on these changes that have been brought by the climate change, of which is the rising of temperatures, the floods and the drought, and to mention few on how farmers can practice sustainable agriculture is maybe by the use of organic manures, of which it can be animal manures, and instead of using fertilizers, because fertilizers are also contributing to the state of our climate. They're contributing to the pollution of water and all that. So with sustainable agriculture, we're trying to mitigate the problems that we are already facing. So farmers can also practice green manuring, of which you can plant crops like your leguminous crops first, and then you harvest them. And then after harvesting, you can now plant crops like your sunflower or your maize. Doing that, you are taking the nutrients that were supplemented by the leguminous crops, because they are good in nitrogen. They make their own nitrogen. So in that way, it will minimize the farmers having to purchase synthetic fertilizers, of which they don't have a good contribution to our climate and our ecosystem at large. So there are a few ways of farming that farmers can abide to and apply within their farming style. And this is not to say that they should just stop on how they are farming right now, but to slowly introduce the sustainable ways of farming.
Look, I guess it takes a mindset shift in terms of the way that things are done, but also farmers being willing to interrupt their cycle of doing things in order to accommodate, Mandisa, what you're saying, this then sustainability in as far as the climate is concerned. When although many of these farmers are dealing just with bread and butter issues, right? So to what extent can they actually afford to, take on some of these conversations realistically is something we'll need to look at too. I want to bring in some of our listeners into this conversation. Sbusiso, you're calling from KZN. Good morning.
Good morning, Ken. How are you?
Well, thank you, Sbusiso.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Mususo Kanyile, and I'm calling from the heart of Zululand, which is Ishawa. I'm very pleased to be part of this program. I will start with a disclaimer. I'm a disabled small-scale farmer, and I'm farming with indigenous felt goats. My predicament is that every time I go to financial institutions, my application is rejected, and simply because I am disabled. And speaking of sustainable farming, I once had the privilege of attending a training session in Setara, where a certain lady by the name of Bridget from the Institute of Natural Resources in Pietermaritzburg came to address us as potential small-scale farmers and goats. And I told the lady that I am interested in indigenous felt goat farming, and I live in a savanna bushveld. It's a place called Ehlanzeni, where there are indigenous trees which are best suited for goats, since goats are browsers. So speaking of sustainable farming is what I practice. And my reason for calling you, Cathy, is that 2 weeks back, your colleague, Stephen Grotes, interviewed Mr. Francois Rogers. I think the gentleman is the MEC for Finance in KZN. I was very inspired by the interview. MEC Rogers said in his interview that he went to his late Majesty, the King Goodwill Zwelithini, while he was still alive, may he so rest in peace. He talked to him about helping small-scale farmers in the whole of Zululand. And I wish to convey my request to the Honorable MEC of Finance, Mr. Francois Rogers, to put his money where his mouth is, so that he can help me to start my what you call my business.
All right, Sbusiso. Thank you for calling in and for putting that request then on the table, and also sharing your experience as a small scale farmer. The heart of it is that he's applied for funding before and been rejected. He believes it's because he is disabled. Xolani, you in the Eastern Cape. Good morning. Good morning, Xolani.
The vegetable side of small-scale farming. I think from the Eastern Cape side, I think one of the things that some guys are not looking at, every street in the towns in the Eastern Cape, there are stalls, ladies that are selling, mostly ladies, I'd say over 98% of the people that are there are ladies selling these vegetables. And then there are many also on the streets, takeaways that are being in that space, people that are selling food in those spaces. I'm asking a question, Cathy. Where are these small-scale farmers? Why are they not utilizing or optimizing, using that for them? Because it's an opportunity to market yourself and be able to supply those, because most of these ladies go to some markets somewhere outside. Lastly, Cathy, I had the opportunity to also mentor a youngster who's got a stall. The deliveries where he got most of his stall was from KwaZulu-Natal. It was in Lusikisiki a couple of years back. I was still working in that environment, and I mentored him. He opened up one stall, and then we worked around. Then he opened about 4 stalls, and as he was raising funds, we ended up working around. Then he bought about 5 kilometers away from the town a small piece of land. Then he started planting cabbages and potatoes in that space. Now the fellow has got almost about 6 stalls, and he is outsourcing from his own space. So what I'm trying to say, some of the small-scale farmers need to do a comprehensive feasibility study on the local market, visit the market instead of only waiting for the state to come into their space.
All right.
That's what I wanted to share.
Thanks for that story, Xolani, and it really shows, the creative ways in which farmers can also be tackling some of these challenges. Mzwandile in Gqeberha, good morning.
Morning, Cathy. Listen, I actually work with investment in this space, and I'm actually a friend also of Jack Armour there. There's a project within the Free State that we went to assist to unlock. So some of the models he's talking about where you do the planning and then coordinate commercial farmers to assist in transformation and also opening the space for the existence of local farming. Jack knows that. We've done that very well there. It's a project that is still unfolding. So I am as much an expert to comment on what yourselves are saying here. There are 3 points I want to make. But before I make them, look, I joined the show a bit late today, so I missed the first half. But let me start here first. I don't know if yourselves did define what is a small-scale farmer. What size goes with small-scale? I'll tell you while I'm asking this, because first and foremost, we must define what is the relationship between scale and sustainability. Because what you find with scale is if you are small-scale, you are unable to hire in expertise, meaning that if the owner or the farmer himself is not there, that operation stops operating because he's the sole one who drives it, therefore is unable to source somebody else like a manager and so forth. The second point is majority of black small-scale farmers are not farming on commercial land. Majority of those farmers are farming on communal land and townships, because if you cannot source a farm now in 2024, which is small, and the produce of the farm is able to repay the cost of sourcing that farm, meaning that automatically the black farmers are subject to government. Another important point, Cathy, you see black people today or post-1994 are joining an industry which has already gone through the birth pangs. So it's an industry that has already formalized, meaning the room for error, the room within which you can play is very limited. The minute a black farmer wants to enter this space and be commercial, now you need capital. So the first challenge that farmers have is access to capital, which allows them to expand and to be able to source the necessary. Sure. And secondly, the last point, which is very critical, Cathy, when you are sourcing funding, the first thing that funding looks at is what is your size, the size of your operation. Because if funding cannot allocate capital to a farmer who will not have the scale to be able to repay that, meaning the size of the farm is as important. Hence, I'm saying I might have missed the first half of your show, but I'd like you to define what is small scale.
Mzwandile, I think you're right when you say you missed the first half, which dealt quite a bit with some of the issues that you're raising now. Both Tabile and Jack we had done quite a bit of work on that, including last week when we actually looked at who is the small scale farmer that we are talking about. Dumile Inqala, I'm going to give you a chance to answer your question very quickly for me, please.
All right, Cathy, I'll be quick. I wanted to your panel to maybe help us tie the issue of seed genetics with the ability to fund successfully. And the reason I'm raising that is because I operate in the hemp cannabis space, And what we found out here is that you get companies that are here to offer off-takes to farmers, but then these off-takes come with the companies having to bring their own seed. Now, the problem with that is that most of the seed that you get from outside, which is Canada, comes already with genetic mutation, some with some kind of the problems, which goes to the issue of what the other lady was raising, of having to get fertilizers and some of the things which are foreign to us. Now, in South Africa, we do have seeds that have been used for cannabis and hemp for a very long time, and emampondweni. But for some reason, government hasn't taken the stance to register these seeds so that they can be used by local farmers, which then disadvantages people. Now, if you have to start a cannabis or hemp farm with the possibility of getting an off-take agreement, it means you have to plant someone's seed. There you already have input costs that are kind of way below your scale, and that is a very big problem. So I also want that to be addressed if it can be, because there's a season coming to start in September, and already there are companies that are lacking here to bring their seeds and offering off-takes, and that's a big problem.
All right.
And a huge community of Emampondweni hasn't been involved in the whole thing because they have their own genetics. So the people who are involved are people from the East London side, because those guys are willing to take seeds from Canada and elsewhere. But that brings problems because there's pollination that could happen. So if government can help us address those kind of issues. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that question, Dumile. Jack, let me give you a chance to go before we wrap up this conversation.
The issue of input costs is a big one. There's a lot of ways to use natural inputs, and I think Mandisa spoke about those, using kraal manure and that kind of stuff instead of fertilizers. So on a small scale, and Zwandile January, I'm Zwandile, nice to talk to you. Also mentioned that the definition of a small-scale farmer is somebody who can't afford own labor, so then he can't even afford then a tractor. So you're using your own labor. So if you are using your own labor on a very small scale and you're using natural fertilizers like manure and stuff, then your input costs are reduced. But then you can only be very small. In Zimbabwe, 2 hectares was the maximum that a family, a husband and wife team, could manage on their own, doing hand planting, hand sowing, using natural compost and stuff. But yes, input cost is a massive problem for commercial farmers as well. Thank you, Cathy.
Mandisa, anything you want to add?
I wanted to, the last caller mentioned something about exporting the seeds and the cannabis seeds that they are using. So I think when he said that they are having problems because there's an upcoming season, so now they need to plant and the seeds might not be here. What I just want to say on that is that maybe I think the government should promote more commercialization of the land-raised seeds. The land-raised seeds it's mostly the seeds that are used in the rural communities. It's like the parental seeds. It's not the hybrid seeds.
Okay.
So I wanted to touch on that maybe like the government needs to look into commercializing the land-raised seeds more than exporting the seeds.
All right. Well, thank you all for your contribution to this conversation. Unfortunately, we're completely out of time.
The top stories this hour. Ramaphosa speaks on climate change and suspected Zamazamas arrested in Limpopo. A very good morning to you. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the various natural disasters currently affecting the country highlight the importance of a climate resilience symposium. He was addressing the National Treasury's Climate Resilience Summit in Pretoria, aimed at finding ways in which the government can fund the country's just energy transition. It comes as Eskom maintains power supply for more than 100 days without rolling blackouts. Ramaphosa also attributed the inclement weather in the Western Cape to climate change.
This Climate Resilience Symposium is taking place at a time when we are witnessing firsthand almost our extreme vulnerability to the impact of changing climate around our own country and in our sub-region. The storms that have hit the parts of Western Cape over the past week have caused enormous devastation to homes, to communities, to businesses and to infrastructure.
Western Cape Premier Alan Wendy says the number of people affected by extreme weather conditions has increased to 158,000. This as a result of a week of inclement weather, including disruptive rain, damaging winds and very cold temperatures in parts of the province. The Cooperative Governance Minister will today visit the affected areas. Wendy has also lauded emergency workers, NGOs and the public for assisting those affected.
Every day I get the numbers and it just seems to be climbing. So 158,000 citizens affected, 47,000 structures, homes, damaged dwellings, from informal to formal. And as you said this morning, we still have over 70 roads closed, although the major passes are generally open. And we try to get the roads open as quickly as possible, and still Clarence Drive, Chapman's Peak closed. But the real issue is in the rural areas like in Citrusdal being blocked off, and some of the smaller towns and villages blocked off.
KZN Kokta MEC Thulasuza Buthelezi says the province is going through a difficult time. He was reacting to the fires that are currently engulfing different parts of the province. The death toll stands at 13. The department says the felt fires have left many other people homeless and houses there damaged. Buthelezi says the subsistence farmers are the most affected. 5 suspected illegal miners have been arrested at Madonzi mine in Malamulele, Limpopo. Police say the suspects were found processing gold. Spokesperson Malesela Ledwaba says the 5, including one undocumented foreign national, will be charged with the illegal possession of precious metals.
The suspects, aged between 31 and 38, were nabbed during intelligence-driven operation that was executed by Vembe District Illicit Mining Task Team in collaboration with Polokwane Air Wing and Vembe Valam Godi Task Team. During the arrest, police confiscated a silver grey Polo motor vehicle with Gauteng registration numbers, together with several mine equipment that were found used to commit crime at the premises in Madonzi village.
And on his first trip to Israel, British Foreign Secretary David Lammy is pushing for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and for Hamas to release Israeli hostages. He has also expressed frustration over a lack of British aid trucks entering Gaza. Lammy arrived yesterday to meet the Israeli and Palestinian leaders. The BBC's Nick Beek has more.
The new Labour government has a series of key decisions to make on the war in Gaza. Among them, its position on the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction over a request to issue an arrest warrant for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. There's also the question of selling arms to Israel and whether the UK will resume funding of UNRWA, the UN agency which assists Palestinian refugees, notably in Gaza. Labour has promised it will recognise a Palestinian state, but has not said when that will be.
The top story at 11, President Cyril Ramaphosa says the various natural disasters currently affecting the country highlight the importance of a climate resilience symposium. For SAFM News, Kemudupi Makhalemele.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
It's 7 after 11 o'clock. Welcome to The Talking Point. I'm Cathy Mohlahlana. A pleasure to have you on the show with us this morning. Coming up in this hour, we're in conversation with the National Student Financial Aid Scheme Administrator, Freeman Nomvalo. We'll be talking about the state of NSFAS and also why it is that we have service providers that have not been paid, have been given the runaround, and it's taken almost extreme measures to get intervention for them. So where are they in the process of understanding what exactly has gone wrong in NSFAS, and what are they doing to ensure that service providers, that clients of NSFAS are not disadvantaged by some of these processes any longer? So we'll have that conversation as we continue with the show. For now, I want to bring in some of your WhatsApp voice notes. And remember, if you have specific questions For the NSFAS administrator, please start sending those through on 086 000 2032. That's the number to dial. That's where I'll be taking your calls. But for voice notes, you can start sending those through on 0614 104 107. I especially want to hear from the people that rely on NSFAS, that use NSFAS, whether it is students, whether it is service providers. What has been your experience in the last couple of months, especially since the administrator took over? Are there perhaps things that you believe he needs to be aware of? Sometimes, officials are not fully appraised of what is happening further down the system. So those voice notes on 0614 104 107. We'll kick it off with that conversation in a moment. Before we do, your WhatsApp voice notes.
Channel the forgiving spirit of Utata Madiba on Afternoon Express, Tuesday at 6 p.m. on S3, as community development practitioner Taryn Liebau shares how he rebuilt a nation with the power to forgive. We discuss the magic of making a child's dream come true and cook up Madiba's favorite oxtail with umngusho. That's Afternoon Express this Tuesday at 6 p.m. only on S3. Repeat Sundays at 8:30 a.m.
Do you have fresh musical talent lighting up your timeline or making waves in your community?
Well, we want to see them shine, so send their details to our WhatsApp line on 063 408 8863 and they could perform live on Expresso.
Discover the hottest new artists and be part of the excitement.
Catch Expresso weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. only on S3 and be part of the magic.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
Good morning, this is Aubrey. I have a query. I was wondering, when you guys get to have an attorney in the studio or someone from the financial industry who is clued up on the law, can you ask that person as more with regards to access with insurance companies? Because you find that people have been paying for years, and then when they get to have a problem, they have to pay the insurance for the insurance to be able to pay them the money that they have been paying to the insurance. To me, it doesn't make sense. I'm really curious to find out what the law really says about that in terms of the Constitution. Is it not like somehow to me it sounds a bit dodgy? Please do inquire of some legal mind with regards to that.
Good morning, Keith. Can you please have SACP for us to answer on VPS? If not today, maybe tomorrow. Yes, we have heard what EFF is saying, and it's being said of EFF, but can we please have SACP, maybe Dr. Mashilo? We want to hear what is SACP saying on this one. Thank you.
Morning, Katie. How much was stolen in VPS? And what is the percentage which is allegedly stolen by the EFF? Because now we see all the eyes have been put on EFF, but the blood percentage, people who stole the money there, are not mentioned. They are mentioned by passing, like SSCP and the ANC. Why do we do that?
Kathy, I'm Takatayo in Cape Town. On this thing of BVS, I think we must allow the law enforcement agencies to divulge the truth to this thing. If really they benefited unduly, there must be consequences. Because why, Kathy? We allowed the Zondo Commission to take over 3 years, trying to investigate all these kind of crimes, but they never put EFF into any wrong. So that is where the fault is, and that 1 billion was spent in that, and EFF was never implicated. So that is what is confusing us now. Let's allow the law enforcement agencies to investigate. Thanks.
Sisiketi, the noise by EFF about VBS, it was blackmailing. They wanted VBS to give them something so that they can keep quiet. That was pure blackmailing. It doesn't work like that, that I'm caught stealing red-handed. Then I say you must not arrest me before you arrest a thief next door. You can't do that. Law does not work like that. Law does not work like that. Then they want to talk about Cyril Ramaphosa. It has nothing to do with Cyril Ramaphosa. This thing is directed to EFF, connected to FBS. Period. That is the only the problem is the VBS against EFF. That's it. Lisa from Brixton.
Hi, Cathy. Hi, Cathy. And the SAFM listeners. EFF is guilty because they were being given a bribe to stop talking bad about VBS. And they know that. That is the reason why that money never went straight into an EFF account. Because now that was their personal bribe. Floyd and Julius. It was their personal bribe for them to keep quiet. And for sure, once they were bribed, they stopped talking and making noise about VBS in Parliament. So they must be charged. They were quiet. They were quiet because now they were being bribed, and that money it was like their personal milk cow. They were being bribed. They were bribed to keep quiet.
Morning, Cathy. Again, thank you very much for hosting such a beautiful show. I'm listening on this challenge of the small-scale farmers. The design, Cathy, is capitalistic. You know, the question of security is just out of order. Why don't these institutions have experts to go and monitor part of their funding, make it a point that it becomes viable and it's profitable, and take their money back in percentages? So the design is just capitalistic, and it's meant to grow more commercial farmers. Thank you. It's Vumisa from Vosloorus.
Good morning, Cathy. I'm just wondering, I'm farming with wine grapes in Ventersdorp, and now how will I be helped for not using fertilizers? Because you plant grapes, they are there forever. And then how will that help me to plant the legumes that she's talking about? So I'm a bit confused now that it's not maize, or rather sunflower, where you can rotate, every year. But now when coming to wine grapes, you only plant your vines once. And from there, it's up until it's 30 plus years, the lifespan of the vines. It's Jeff in Ventersdorp.
Yeah, I must say that I do agree with what many of you have said around small-scale farming in this country, that by design, small-scale farmers find themselves failing or not at a point where they're able to be profitable because of how the system is closed out to them. And so it does create so many challenges that would otherwise not be as big as they are if the system was perhaps different. But the question is, what needs to be done now to make things a little easier for them? Our final conversation of the day, we're in conversation with Freeman Nomvalo. He's the administrator for the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. Mr. Nomvalo, good morning to you.
Good morning to you too.
Well, last week, you may know, we received a call from Robert Dlamini. He is the chairperson of the Mpumalanga Association of Student Accommodation. It wasn't the first time he was getting in touch with us. In fact, he's been complaining since about February, which is the first time we understand that NSFAS did not make payments to them when it comes to student accommodation. Of course, the point now was at an absolute boiling point where landlords had not been paid for months, had been reaching out to NSFAS officials and, according to Robert, had received absolutely no response. It resulted in them going to the NSFAS offices in Cape Town to physically try and get answers. They were prevented from going into the building, which is when Robert called into the show. We got in touch with some of the officials. They went downstairs to hear them out, and it seems that the matter has now been resolved. All of that really paints a picture of a system, Mr. Nomvalo, that is very dysfunctional. There's a reason why NSFAS is under administration, and you, of course, are the person that is now tasked with turning it around. But it does seem that the problems that you now have to fix, some of them still remain quite big.
Yeah. First, thank you for this opportunity. I agree that the problems haven't been fully resolved. And it was unfortunate that Mr. Dlamini did not get the nod initially. And it's a standard process in any building that when somebody does a cold calling, may not be granted access. It's a security issue, but unfortunately, he was then prohibited from coming in. And through intervention, and thanks to that, a team came down and they sat down and they discussed and they found a way to resolve the issues. Even on the day, there are some issues that they couldn't resolve immediately, and then they will be in touch with Mr. Dlamini so that by the end of the month, the balance of the amounts that were due to him would be paid, which paints a picture as well of the misalignment of information that we sometimes have that relates to the claims that the accommodation providers would make, which must be verified before any payment. It is not desirable and acceptable for any accommodation provider to have to go through the type of agony that these accommodation providers have had to go through. But we are working to resolve all of that.
One of the big challenges, of course, Mr. Nomvalo, is the fact that despite their continued communication and reaching out to NSFAS, there was simply no response, that they had been by and large ignored by the various officials that should have helped them even before they got on a flight from Mpumalanga to Cape Town. And yes, that's part of what has necessitated this conversation, right? It's to understand what is happening within NSFAS administratively that can help us understand really what your work as an administrator has entailed to try and get things back up and running. Because, you know, we can be speaking about Robert today, but we don't know what the other challenges could possibly exist out there.
Yeah. Look, when you find an organization that had the kind of problems that NSFAS has had, for as long as NSFAS has had the problems, I mean, if you look at the terms of reference of the 2018 intervention and the terms of reference of this intervention, you find that these problems are recurring. It therefore points to a much deeper problem than just people problem. And those deeper problems take time to resolve. But those deeper problems also result in a culture that is not desirable, that is toxic. And a number of employees, you find that they have been reluctant to make the decisions they need to make because of the consequences that they feel would visit them when they do so. So you need to build a culture where employees are also not afraid to make the calls they need to make in order to support accommodation providers, in order to support students. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, to ensure the culture changes, and it's a culture of helpfulness, but that culture must be undergirded by the comfort that employees have, that when they make decisions in good faith, they would be protected.
What are these deeper problems that you have been able to identify?
Well, I don't think I've identified all of them, but it is vested interest. We deal with huge sums of money, whether we're dispersing allowances or paying accommodation providers. So it's vested interest that seeks to make sure that they make the maximum benefit in the system, and those vested interests. It's easy to see there's a vested interest, but it's always very complicated to identify exactly where it sits. But it is definitely the interest that seeks to maximize benefit from the funds that we manage.
Where is this vested interest coming from? Is it vested interest by officials of NSFAS and therefore it's easy for them to interfere with processes? Is it vested interest, as we have previously seen allegations against members of the board at NSFAS? Some, yes, have subsequently left, but is it coming through from that level? Is it individuals outside of NSFAS that are putting pressure on individuals? So just help me understand how these vested interests then influence the work that this body is doing. How does it manifest itself in the administration processes to such an extent that you would have students not receiving their money, you would have landlords not being paid?
Well, the symptoms, it's easy to see the symptoms. It's the delayed payments. It's creating additional steps in the process of executing a simple task, and it's not just employees, and I think employees largely is the element of fear, but it's all the stakeholders. It's all the stakeholders in the value chain. You can't exclude any one of them. Obviously, we're still digging in order to make sure that where there is untoward actions, corrupt actions, we can deal with them. But from a pure vested interest point of view, it is multi-stakeholders. It's not just internal, it's also external.
What are they doing, Mr. Nomvalo, from what you can see, that is getting in the way of the work that NSFAS has to do? Because until we're able to identify it and take the necessary steps to either prevent it or to address it, we're going to sit with this problem. But we can't address a problem that doesn't have a name. So vested interest, yes, gives us a direction to look in, but it's like the elephant in the room. What is this vested interest?
Well, look, two things that I'm going to say. First, we still need to dig and make sure that we corner it and know exactly who the parties that are concerned. But it's vested interest. It's people that stand to benefit. And I'm only going to express it in those general terms at this stage for obvious reasons, that when we find out who the parties are, we've got to deal with them through the legal process. So you don't want to run ahead of those processes. But it is those that either stand to benefit or stand to lose when things change that tend to create obstacles and create processes that leave room for manipulation and so on. And then, of course, because you've got employees that have to execute on a regular basis, either those employees would be covered under a cloud of fear in order for them to have to execute the things that the vested interest parties would want them to execute. I can only express it in general terms, primarily because, one, we've got to investigate and close to the bottom, and where we've picked up the issues, we've got to deal with them through the legal process and see where that takes us. So I can't be as specific as you would want me to be.
So if it's a case of employees afraid to act because there may be repercussions for it. So they, let's say they're invoices, which is a practical example. They're invoices that are sitting on the table that need to be paid. The service providers have delivered the service. So as the official who's supposed to pay the invoice, I then do what? I don't pay the invoice because I'm afraid. And if I'm afraid of what?
Yeah, look, it's not as simple as that. So if you take an invoice, NSFAS has been in problems for a very long time. So a lot of the procurement that would have taken place in the past, in some instances, you find that there were question marks, like the issues that were stated in the Versman's report, like some of the issues that the Auditor General would raise. So as an employee that is about to undertake an activity, you then start asking yourself a question. If I allow this payment to go through, am I violating the PFMA? Am I likely to be the one that takes the flak for the activity? Most of the payments do get paid, obviously, but in as far as the areas where there are question marks, then employees tend to err on the side of caution and delay the payment. And it doesn't help that sometimes you find that in some of the claims, for instance, if you think about the case of Mr. Dlamini, some of the payments had to be done by the university and not by NSFAS. But they were in the list of things that NSFAS had to deal with. So all of those matters then create an employee then starts saying, but what have I not seen in this claim that could put me into trouble? So you find that really, out of abundance of caution, some employees then delay the issues a bit longer to try and investigate and find out what's happening.
We're going to continue the conversation with the NSFAS Administrator, Freeman Nomvalo, in a moment. It's 11:30, time for your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Cathy. And with the news headlines, Cathy Mohlahlana. Good morning. The Western Cape has been declared a disaster area following extreme weather conditions in large parts of the province last week. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the various natural disasters currently affecting the country highlight the importance of a climate resilience symposium, and the 4 accused in the case of the disappearance of 6-year-old Jocelyn Smith will be back in the Vredenburg Magistrates Court in the Western Cape on September the 16th. A full news update coming up at midday.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
We continue the conversation on the talking point. Freeman Nomvalo, the administrator for the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, is our guest for this morning. So, Mr. Nomvalo, in terms of the work that you're doing, are you doing a wholesale review of the contracts that NSFAS has entered into, especially given some of the concerns, as you highlighted, that were listed in the Varsman's report?
Absolutely. We're going through all of the agreements to understand them, understand the process that was we've gone through to enter into them. We've got a number of contracts that also have expired as a result of that fear that employees have, that we need to make sure that they are renewed, or were able to continue providing the services that are dependent on those contracts without getting into an irregular expenditure space. So there's a whole host of activities that we're doing in ensuring that, one, we deal with the past procurement that may have not been done properly, but where such procurement had expired and not renewed as a result of the fear I've been speaking about, you are then able to renew those and make them available for servicing the organization.
To a large extent, a lot of this would have happened with the knowledge of individuals in the organization and even individuals who approved some of these activities. When you look at what you've been able to uncover so far, are you anticipating a situation where officials and employees of NSFAS could well stand to face more action when it comes to this breaking of procedures?
Where there's been wrongdoing that's been malicious, we're definitely going to have to hold employees accountable, and all the other parties as well, not just employees. So that is a natural consequence. In fact, the PFMA doesn't give you any other option except to take corrective action.
Where are we in terms of the backlog for students that had not been paid their dues in terms of school fees, in terms of accommodation? Have you been able to, at the very least, resolve that?
The majority of them have been resolved, and I'm going to make reference to student allowances as an example. Run about April, beginning of May, you recall that there were banning of tires in various TVET colleges because students had not received their allowances for some time, or they had received allowances and then the money would disappear and all of those things. We've stabilized that. And to that end, we then decided that we're going to pay directly. The allowances would be paid directly to students' bank accounts. And we went on a campaign to get students to submit their bank accounts, and they did. There's still a number of students that have not submitted their bank accounts. Now we're investigating those matters, whether are these students that are indeed in existence, or these were fictitious students that slipped into the system. But the big bulk of them, more than 85% and close to 90%, has been resolved. Now, in as far as the student fees are concerned, there were payments that were outstanding, especially in the TVET sector, that went back to 2023. We made those payments in the last week. And now, in as far as our records can show, we should be up to date in as far as the 2023 allowances are concerned. We should also be up to date in as far as the 2024 allowances are concerned, except to the extent that the information relating to the registration of various students may or may not be available. Confidently, I can say that we're moving in the right direction there, but we will obviously be getting a Mr. Dlamini coming up if there is some outstanding issues that we need to deal with.
Let me bring in Philemon Lukele, calling us from Mpumalanga. Philemon, good morning.
Morning, Cathy. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Go for it, Philemon.
No, let me just put one aspect into context. When Mr. Dlamini and 4 other members of MASA, the Mpumalanga Association of Student Providers, came to Cape Town, they were not only representing the problems of their service provision at their guest houses. They were representing us here in Mpumalanga. We're about 400 SMMEs, and we have come together to form an association. So when NSFAS was refusing them access, they were refusing almost 400 people that have got a concern and have been frustrated since the beginning of the year. That's one issue. The second issue is that I think Mr. Nomvalo is not really aware of the velocity of the problems that NSFAS is causing to ordinary women and men, blacks in particular, who are vendors, who genuinely have turned their own houses in a spirit of care, in particular here in Bombela, to care and to house poor students that do not have accommodation. The institutions can't meet the demands of accommodation. But the extent of which the delays of payment or non-payment have caused, we are sitting here. Myself, I provide accommodation with the TVET College, Etlanzeni TVET College. I can tell you that since May, we were only paid February March, April, May, June, July, we are not paid. And as we phone NSFAS, there is no response. As you email, they say you must email. The email does not get responded to. And as you are referred to a person that you are told is the one that is dealing with TVET colleges or the universities, what you get, for instance, the one that we are not paid at the TVET college, you are told the person is on leave. He left a message that he has paid TVET colleges, but we are not paid up to now. Here is the problem I have.
Yeah.
Mr. Nomvalo, when he came in, he said he sent us all over the country a message that he will pay service providers on the 25th of every month for the months to come. But here we are on the 10th. Today it's on the 15th of July. But we are not paid from May. Here he is sitting there in your studio. Ask him what has happened to that commitment. The last thing I want to raise, the NSFAS, when they say they've dealt with students, they give the student the food, they give the student their personal care allowance, but they don't pay the student accommodation. Where do they think the students stay and sleep? What water is the student using? What electricity? What Wi-Fi? We are compelled by NSFAS to provide Wi-Fi, but those services are not paid for 3 or 4 months. But they give the student his food allowance. Where do they think the students stay and sleep all this time? Those are the issues that we are having.
Right.
The last thing is the portal issue. Can we not be talked to through portal? Can NSFAS come and talk to us in the institutions where we are providing the service? Or, Mr. Nombalo, make sure that you go to a roadshow to all these provinces and address us, stop talking to us through portals.
Okay, Philemon. Mr. Nomvalo?
Thank you. And thank you to Mr. Lukele for that input. A few things. Starting with the last one, we made a commitment already that we'll go on the roadshow because the issues from province to province are different. So we made that commitment in May already, and we are planning for that. We will be announcing soon in terms of when we'll be in which part of the country. That's number one. Number two, the commitment to pay remains. And the commitment is the commitment to pay all legitimate claims. Now, again, without necessarily making Mr. Dlamini an excuse, it's just to illustrate the point. This is not an excuse. In Mr. Dlamini's case, we obviously picked up that there were issues that we needed to pay as NSFAS, but we also picked up that in the list, there were things that were not an obligation of NSFAS to pay, which were an obligation of the institution. So we need to be sure that to the extent that there are still outstanding payments, are those payments the obligation of NSFAS or not? And then we pay. There is no other way about it. We have to honor the payment. And the plight of the accommodation providers is obviously a sad state. Nobody wishes anyone to be in that state. I know of people that have communicated to say they've got the final letter from the bank and the bank wishes to dispossess the property and so on. So it's really a tragic situation that you would not want to wish for anybody, which is why we made the commitment that we would want to fast track all of these payments. And yes, there are still here and there matters that are outstanding, and we will be going to the provinces to address these matters accordingly.
And the issue of service providers not being paid on time? The 25th of every month?
No, that's the point I'm making, that we are paying all legitimate claims, and to the extent that there are any that have not yet been paid, we would want to obviously deal with them. But the point is this, that some of the claims that come through to NSFAS are not NSFAS claims. They are claims that should be sent to an institution.
But surely there must still be communication with these individuals to that effect.
Yes, no, agreed. But the point I'm making is that we will pay all of those claims that relate to NSFAS, and then those that do not relate to NSFAS should be redirected to the relevant place for them to be settled. That's the point I'm making.
But if the officials are not even responding to emails, Mr. Nomvalo, that's a problem, because how else is a service provider supposed to know that they're knocking on the wrong door?
Look, I have to deal with issues of non-response to emails on a case-by-case basis. And as far as I'm aware, all of these issues come through and they get dealt with the communication to the various stakeholders. Mr. Dlamini's issues that he dealt with, we are following up on all of those issues. That's a specific case they're dealing with. It's difficult to deal with matters on a general point of view. Ehlanzeni College is a case in point now that Mr. Lukele is referring to, and we're going to be checking the details on that particular college and seeing what the issues are in relation to Mr. Lukele and other colleagues of his in Ehlanzeni is concerned.
John, you're in George. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Cathy, and to your guest. I would just like to make a few points. I do understand that there need to be procedures put in place so that there isn't corruption and issues that like fictitious people being paid out. However, there's a lady that works in the company with me, and she's in a lower income bracket. Her daughter has been at Stellenbosch University since February. The year is nearly halfway through. No payment has been made to her accommodation. She's received no payments. The family themselves are struggling to get the money together to pay for the needs, her accommodation, etc. Otherwise, she's going to be thrown out where she is. And every single effort they make to contact NSFAS is an absolute. It's frustrating. She can't get hold of people. They don't phone back. They don't respond to emails. I can understand what your guest is saying about the issues that they have. But from my point of view, there has to be a proper service in place so that people can, be contacted, that there's a flow of information. At this stage, nothing. There's just absolutely nothing. No information. They don't say. And as I said, they're paying from their own pockets to keep their daughter at university, and it's putting an extreme strain on the family. The point that I'm making is I understand what your guest is saying, but what I can say, the NSFAS system is in a shambles, absolute shambles.
John, thanks for that call. Freeman?
Yes, and John is raising an important point, and it brings another dimension that has worked very well in resolving student matters. Earlier this morning, I was at a conference of SADFETA, which is the student body that deals with matters affecting students. That is also an avenue that students have been using to escalate matters. And those matters, through the SADFETA leadership, do get to my attention. But also, not only that, the institution infrastructure, there are bursary officers, there are accommodation officers in various institutions that also help to deal with this matter. And so where, for whatever reason, NSFAS processes fail students, I would encourage that also those channels are used, because those channels then are able to take these matters on behalf of students and aggregate them and get them dealt with.
Yeah, but it does sound
really
like there's a
helps to do
lot
that.
of work that still needs to be done on that front.
Absolutely. You see, what troubles me is that obviously a lot has been done, but you still have these cases outstanding, and obviously you don't know the detail of each case. But if we follow the channels that I've just indicated, the student body as well as the institution bodies that are there, it would definitely lead to the resolution one way or the other of the matter. There is a case, for instance, in the Western Cape, not necessarily in George, where the person is not qualifying in terms of the policy, completely not qualifying in terms of the policy, even in that person's own communication, and that person is making noise. So you do have those minor cases where people do that. we encourage
All
people
right.
to stick to policy, but where people do not find joy, can they use those internal structures within the institution, because they do help to ensure that these matters are elevated in time.
All right, Mr. Nomvalo, we're going to have to leave it there. It sounds like it's still going to be months in the making before we get any clear feedback from NSFAS around when exactly, if you as a client require communication, you'll get communication back. Why must it have to take you reporting to student councils and different representatives just for somebody to answer their phone or to respond to your email to tell you that this is the status, this is what we're working on, this is what we can expect? It really is as simple as that. All right, we're going to leave it there for today. The Talking Point, back with you again tomorrow.
The Arctic and Antarctic are the greatest and least known wildernesses of all. Magical worlds inhabited by the most bizarre and hardy creatures on Earth. David Attenborough travels to the end of the Earth, taking viewers on an extraordinary journey across all 4 seasons in the polar regions of our planet, north and south. Prey and hunter are caught up in the battle of survival. Meet terrifying sea spiders and woodlice the size of dinner plates, polar bears, seabirds, penguins and orcas, and learn how global warming is threatening this fragile ecosystem. Channel your inner explorer with Frozen Planet, Sundays at 6:30 p.m. only on S3. Open up.
The European outfit want to interrogate African resilience, but Tanzanian champions are highly spirited to rise. German Bundesliga club FC Augsburg battles it out with Yanga SC from Tanzania. This is the Mpumalanga Premiers International Cup 2024. Do not miss out on the mouth-watering clash between FC Augsburg and Young Africans on Saturday, 20 July at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, SABC 1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Tickets are available at CompuTicket. Proudly brought to you by the TS Galaxy Foundation and SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SAFM presents another episode of The Door, an addict's journey, read by Simpson Kumalo.
I asked him how long, and he said it was a minimum of 5 months. 5 months? What the hell? What were they going to be doing to me? Most programs I knew of were a month maximum, and that was stretching it. 5 months. Was my mind playing tricks on me, or was this for real? Hell, just that information was enough of an excuse for me to use, to process that nonsense good and proper. The sad reality was that I had to do it. I couldn't control myself or what was happening around me. My behavior caused my family to argue and cause a great split. I felt suicidal again. I had to figure out how to tell my business partners. Damn, that is a daunting task, and I really didn't know how I was going to accomplish it, what they would think of me. I would somehow ingeniously manage to keep my using from them. Of course, they had seen how much weight I had lost. I was a skeleton, just bones walking around. They probably thought I had AIDS, but nobody ever asked that question. Maybe they talked about it in the corridors, but never to me directly. After a lot of back and forth, calling South Coast Recovery, having long chats with them, going on a few binges, romanticizing how I could still stay on drugs but better manage my life, I decided to tell them. Eventually, I made the decision and called South Coast Recovery to book myself in. This was the most difficult call I had to make. I paid the deposit. I went to my local pastor, Apostle I.N. Sitole, and took an offering to pray for me. I needed to sow a seed of faith for my recovery. I made sure my kids' school fees were paid up for 5 months and arranged for all the other necessary bills to be paid while I was away. I'm sure I missed a couple, as my brain was most definitely fried. At least the essentials in my warped mind were covered. I was a junkie, but I had some semblance of still knowing what was right and wrong. I was not going to leave my kids in the lurch. What a contradiction. It's not like I hadn't already left them in the lurch 1,000,000 times over. I guess addict behavior will always justify to itself and try to rationalize by making a terrible situation look decent. I was down, desperate, and one big mess. I called my good friend and confidant Simon Muntle, who said he would take me to rehab. He volunteered. My goodness, just like that. He's a special breed of friend. A 7-hour drive, and he said he would do it without hesitation. This is when you realize who is there for you and who is not. Simon was one of the people who were with me all the way. He never confronted me, judged me, condemned me. Though I didn't know what he truly felt about my situation, I'm sure he cared enough to say nothing and just be there for me. I'm grateful that there are still such great people in the world. Simon and I had been drinking buddies, but I never told him about my drug use. I didn't want him to get involved. He seemed to have a serious challenge when it came to alcohol. He looked up to me, and I'm sure there was nothing to look up to now. It was rough and the situation tense. Minimal conversation and utter silence all the way. An occasional talk there and there was all that was happening, and who can blame the guy? I'm sure he was flabbergasted, shocked, confused, and saddened by my state of affairs. The last he could do most probably was to get me to a place, a safety rehab. I had nowhere to hide now, and I had run out of options. I went through a series of emotions, from feeling confident that this is what I needed to do for the sake of my family and myself, and this is what I put myself through. I was under no illusion I was not doing this for anyone except myself. It took almost the whole day for me to pack my stuff. Simon arrived in his Range Rover at my house around midday. He was ready to take all my stuff, whatever I dished out, and he was patient. I mean patient. I took my time while using at the same time and made frequent trips to the bathroom, and he was just chilled. I'm sure I was trying to get to his last nerve so he could just give up and go home and leave me alone. But oh no, this sucker was having none of it. He just chilled in a sofa and waited for me. I left him in the house in the name of going to get essentials, and he didn't budge. When I came back, he was there, chilling. He gave me some snippets. Ready when you are, Chief. Geez, how do I deal with this? I went through the emotions of wanting to go and not wanting to go and back again, and eventually I relented that we are going. I need to at least take a stash, and I asked him to take my luggage in his car while I went to the shop one more time. At least if I could get the stash for the road, I felt ready to go. So I went to my dealer and got the last stuff for the ride and checked it in his house to make sure the stuff is real and good. Imagine driving on the road with this dude, and halfway there I found that the stuff is horrible. I wouldn't know what to do with myself. Before I left, I visited one of my business partners, Cesar Mulibatsi, to confess and lay it out to him that I was a junkie. His business partner is a junkie. He wasn't there, thank God, so I told his wife. A kind-hearted, loving, generous, and spiritually deep individual who, for all intents and purposes, is my sister to this day. I laid it to her without sugarcoating it. I don't like beating around the bush and telling stories and riddles. Tell me the truth in my face and leave nothing. I can deal with that. Don't go around and around like we're playing hide and seek. I can't stand individuals like that. Tell me straight up, good or bad, and let me decide what I do. Don't cushion it and try to soften the blow. That don't work with me. Tell me straight up and leave nothing. Just brutal facts. I will love and respect you for it. So when my turn came, I did not blame the devil or any other thing whatsoever. I just told her straight up, I'm a crackhead, a junkie, and I came to tell your husband that his business partner that he has known for so many years. She prayed for me, and then someone drove me to SCR. Someone had already waited for about 4.5 hours for me. He was incredibly patient. He was simply there for me. I will be forever grateful to him. I had bought about 6,000 rand worth of drugs, so I was well prepared for the journey. I was tense in the car, and I kept telling someone there were people following us and the stars were watching us, helicopters. It must have been a nightmare for him. I was completely paranoid. I made sure we stopped at every garage along the way so I could smoke. Nothing beats smoking. It is the best feeling you could ever have, and words fail me to describe it really. We arrived early in the morning. Before they searched my bag, I asked to use the bathroom and had another smoke there in the rehab. They gave me all the rules. I had to pay again up front, so I said I could go to the bank to get the money. They allowed me to go, and I, of course, used again while I was out. I scraped my pipes clean to get all I could get. When I got back, I handed them my pipe and my lighter. Then they sent me straight to my room. I slept for 2 days. They gave me medications to flush my system. The third day, I felt a little bit better. For the first week, all you do is sleep, eat, and see your doctor. You can participate in the program, but for the first week, it's optional. After the first week, they woke me up at 5:30 a.m. and handed me a broom. I had to sweep. That was the first indication of what my life would be like for the next 5 months. That was the toughest time of my life. I had sobered up and I had committed to this. I'm not one to break commitment, so I knew I was in for a real rough time. They took my phone and I wasn't allowed to contact my family for 6 weeks, and even then, it would be under supervision. I met Mr. Cooper, who had founded South Coast Recovery Center with his wife. He had been through the process and was himself a recovering addict from drugs. I guess he knew from the little information I had what drug did to both addicts and their families. I also met the 90-odd other drug and alcohol addicts. Some of them were worse than me. You had all kinds of addicts. Hell, I thought I was better. There were some mean-looking folks. You can tell that drugs took a lot of them. They basically suck your soul. They were young, old, middle-aged, all types. The schizos, psychos, and guys you could just tell were not done with their drugging. I was fighting for my life and couldn't help asking myself how I got there. Me, Abna. How did I manage to mess up so badly that I was imprisoned with a bunch of seriously broken and damaged people? For the first month or so, I kept to myself and didn't open up to anyone.
SAFM, leading the conversation.
It's 12 o'clock on Monday, the 15th of July, 2024. Very warm welcome to Updated Noon here on SAFM. Leading the conversation, I'm Sakina Kamwendo. Coming up in the next hour.
We have launched a number of other initiatives to meet our emissions targets. The Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has lamented the impact of climate change on the country's economy.
An assassination attempt is contrary to everything we stand for as a nation, everything. It's not who we are as a nation. It's not America. And we cannot allow this to happen.
And U.S. President Joe Biden has spoken out against the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. Coming up in sport.
What a great day for South African sport, unless you count the Springboks. And I also bring back my soundbite for no particular reason.
Can't wait. John Chirica. Those details coming up in the second half of the show. Please share your views with us. You can write to us via SMS on 41391. That's the SMS line number, charged at R150 per SMS. You can also write to us via X or Facebook, our handle at SABC News_radio, or using the hashtag Updated Noon. Alternatively, there's the WhatsApp voice note number 0826923909. That's the other way you can get in touch with us. Well, these and more stories coming up on this Monday edition of Updated Noon. First, though, here's the latest news with Modupi Mohlahlana.
Thank you very much, Meka Mwendo. The top story is Sawa, the Western Cape is declared a disaster area, and Ramaphosa addresses climate change. A very good afternoon. The Western Cape has been declared a disaster area following extreme weather conditions in large parts of the province last week. The declaration was made following a meeting between the Premier Alan Winde and the Kokta Minister Velenkosini Hlabisa in Cape Town this morning. Winde says the cost estimates are being calculated.
I really want to thank the Minister for the speed in which we've got this declaration, and so that is just really going to help us with financing the costs of fixing the problem, making sure that we are responding as quickly as possible. We've got to really start investing far more resources into mitigation mechanisms, into redesign, into rebuild.
President Cyril Ramaphosa says that the various natural disasters currently affecting the country highlight the importance of a climate resilience symposium. He was addressing the National Treasury's Climate Resilience Symposium in Pretoria, aimed at finding ways in which the government can fund the country's just energy transition. The gathering comes as Eskom maintains a power supply for more than 100 days without rolling blackouts. Ramaphosa also attributed the inclement weather in the Western Cape to climate change.
This climate resilience symposium is taking place at a time when we are witnessing firsthand almost our extreme vulnerability to the impact of changing climate around our own country and in our sub-region. The storms that have hit the parts of Western Cape over the past week have caused enormous devastation to homes, to communities, to businesses, and to infrastructure.
KZN Kokta MEC Thulasizwe Buthelezi says the province is going through a very difficult time. He was reacting to the fires that are currently engulfing different parts of the province. The death toll stands at 13. The department says the veld fires have left many other people homeless and some houses damaged. Buthelezi says subsistence farmers are the worst affected.
The whole province is engulfed in flames. Just this morning, the Premier, Mr. Thamsanqa Ntuli, is holding a cabinet meeting to see what kind of immediate interventions we can do. Tragically, over the weekend, we lost firefighters in Howick. And in Durban, in the Kenville informal settlement, we lost a life where 200 dwellings were razed to the ground.
The 4 accused in the case of the disappearance of 6-year-old Jocelyn Smith will be back in the Vredenburg Magistrates Court in the Western Cape on September 16th. They appeared briefly in court this morning, where the case was postponed. The little girl went missing from her house in the Middelbos informal settlement in Saldanha Bay nearly 5 months ago. 4 people, including the child's mother, Kelly Smith, and her boyfriend, Joaquin Apollos, face several charges in connection with the disappearance. The charges include trafficking in persons with the purpose of exploitation and kidnapping. A high court date will be set when they reappear. And Limpopo Premier Phophi Ramathuba has congratulated Kgothatso Montjane for winning the 2024 Wimbledon wheelchair doubles. Montjane and Japanese Yui Kamiji beat the Dutch duo Diede de Groot and Jiske Griffoen in London yesterday. Ramathuba says Montjane's victory will inspire young women and girls.
We extend our congratulations and overwhelming joy on your remarkable achievement of winning the ladies' double wheelchair Wimbledon title. Your hard work, perseverance and dedication have paid off, showcasing your exceptional talent and skill. You have made us all proud. We hope this achievement will inspire other young girls, especially from rural areas, to believe that the sky is the limit, said Premier Dr. Phophi Ramathuba. I'm Justina Masedi, SABC News, Polokwane.
Recapping the top story this hour, the Western Cape has been declared a disaster area following extreme weather conditions in large parts of the province last week. Back to you, SK, for SAFM News. Kemudupi Makhalemele.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m. Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo.
Well, a very good afternoon. Thanks so much, Mudupi. It's 7 minutes after 12 here on Update at Noon. And thanks so much for choosing to spend the next hour or so with us as we bring you updates on several stories. Now, some of those stories you've heard in the news bulletin there with Mudupi Makhalemele. And of course, I think KG Montjane has just touched down. I think that flight was expected to arrive at 11:30, and this after she, of course, won the Wimbledon wheelchair doubles along with her Japanese partner. And what a proud moment for South Africa, and especially beating the Dutch pairing. And if you follow wheelchair tennis, you'll know that the Dutch in both the men's and the women's games are at the top of their game right now. So no mean feat there. So well done, KG, and so glad, for flying the South African flag high and making us proud. So we'll follow up. We'll see if we get anything coming through about that welcoming for KG at the O.R. Tambo International Airport. Some of the other stories we're following up on in KwaZulu-Natal, an update on the Boston fire story. This is the one that claimed 6 lives of 6 firefighters